Does aim training really work? This is a question I've had for a little while myself now, so I finally decided to take action and try it personally so that I can have my own experience and so that I can finally make a decision on the topic. I've done a bit of aim training myself in the past on aim labs and a little bit on Kovacs, but I never really cared for it. It was just something I would do in my free time if I was bored or wanted to mess around and play some grid shot, for example. Then I found out there was a whole community backing it and found out about YouTubers like Viscos, Matty OW, and Miscolors. Seeing their gameplay made me almost envious of them, and it made me wonder if I would personally ever be able to hit shots and flicks like them someday. Now admittedly, I was insanely discouraged at first, because I found out that a lot of people that were that good at aiming had hundreds if not thousands of hours already put into aim trainers. However, I really wanted to be able to hit shots like them, and it looked so much fun being able to flick and switch onto targets like them, so I decided to give it a try. My first hurdle was choosing what aim trainer I wanted to use. I used a lot of aim labs before, but I also had Kovacs, which I purchased a while ago, but never really used all that much. In the end, I decided I would go with Kovacs, and after watching Matty OW's video on all of his settings, it made everything so much more visually and audibly pleasing, and I enjoyed it so much that with my newfound settings and the idea of this video I wanted to make, I finally had enough motivation to dedicate actual time into aim training to see for myself if it really is worth it. To start things off, I decided to revisit the voltaic benchmarks, but this time I decided to go with Kovacs. I've done these benchmarks before just as a gauge when I was casually aim training to see where I stood when I first watched a few of Viscos' videos, but this time I wanted to take things a lot more seriously. The first time I completed the benchmarks and did a little bit of aim training, I started off as gold on both aim labs and on Kovacs. I then managed to get to gold complete on both and eventually even plat on aim labs. And for a little more context, I've been playing keyboard and mouse for about 3 years now since I got my PC in 2021. So with minimal aim training here and there, it took me about 3 years to get to gold or plat level according to the voltaic benchmarks. Anyway, the reason I quit aim training the first time I tried to take it more casually was because I was doing way more than I should have, and it was too much to actually be enjoyable for me to have fun with. I was forcing myself to play really long and tedious playlists, and it ended up making it feel more like a chore than just something I was doing on the side to have fun. This time, after doing some more research with voltaic on the Kovacs side of things, I tweaked some of the routines that they had and made the whole process of aim training more enjoyable for myself. What they recommended for a lot of their playlists is an hour to an hour and a half long, and for me, that was just too much time and commitment for me to feel motivated to play it. So instead, I moved all of the scenarios in the playlist down to 1 time each and decided that if I wanted to do more, I would. Whether it's another playlist or just replaying the same scenario or a whole playlist again. This made things a lot more palatable and helped me stick with everything with aim training and voltaic in general. Anyway, that's enough intro. Let's get into the first week. Began the whole process by making a day-to-day schedule that I was going to do for the aim training. I'll throw it onto the screen now, but it basically consisted of 2 days of benchmarking, 2 days of a specific game, and 3 days of fundamentals. I got this idea from watching this video from Viscos also on the screen, which he did say was a general guide, but for me it worked perfectly. Now, as it was Thursday when I first started, I ended up forming the whole routine around that day so that I could start with benchmarking on day 1 to see where I currently stood and what I needed to work on. On day 1, the benchmark started a little bit worse than I thought it would, admittedly. I figured that since I had a bunch of flat scores in the benchmarks for aim labs, that all of it would carry over into Kovacs and I would easily hit flat scores on at least half of the scenarios. Boy was I wrong. At the end of the day, even after trying some of the scenarios multiple times, I only managed to get 1 single flat score, and even that, I barely scraped by in getting it. However, I didn't take things too seriously as it was just the first day and it shows how much room I still have for improvement. I decided to set a goal for myself at the end of this day as well. I really wanted to push myself in these 30 days, so I decided that I would shoot for Jade on the voltaic benchmarks, 3 full ranks up from gold. That means that by the end of these 30 days, I'd have to go from a gold player to having mostly Jade and Diamond scores. I didn't know if it would be possible, but taking this as serious as I was, I really wanted to see if I could go that far. On day 2, nothing to write home about really happened. I just did my normal routine for the day with the voltaic fundamentals, and that was really all. Day 3, however, was a bit more eventful. On this day, I did my normal routine for the day, which was my game-specific playlist for me, but Valorant. After I finished it, I had a couple of options. The main one was to just replay the playlist and work on any scenario I felt I could use some work. Instead, however, I found another playlist from voltaic called the Bardos or Bardozy. I'm not really sure how to pronounce it, so I'm sorry for that, but it was an advanced routine for Valorant. Basically, the premise of it was to do each scenario a total of 4 times, 2 times on your normal sensitivity and 2 times on double that sensitivity. Now, not having time for that, I decided to go with 1 of each personally. but it was definitely weird to me at first. After all, I wasn't used to playing any scenarios on double my normal sensitivity, but regardless how frustrating it felt at first, I felt for some reason like it would be good for me to continue on with it instead of giving up. The point of this playlist is to learn how to control your mouse on the higher sensitivities because it can be beneficial, and I imagine it will help you with overall mouse control. Like I said earlier, at first things felt very weird, but I got used to it pretty quickly, and eventually, whenever I would switch back to my normal sensitivity, I would beat my previous high scores for a few of the scenarios. I'm not sure if that in itself is coincidence, but I felt I should include that part. Regardless, I really do believe that this playlist is a good addition to the routine I had already figured out, so I decided to keep it in the rotation whenever I had more free time on the game-specific playlist days of aim training. Day 4 was the next big day that I had. This was the second day of the benchmarking that I had, and it was time to see if any of the effort that I had been putting in was paying off. I started the day by just playing some random scenarios, picking and choosing from their playlists, just so that I could warm up a little bit before the benchmarking. Then the time finally came, and it was time to see if I had improved at all. This day completely shocked me, because I just kept getting better score after better score, and eventually I ended the day going from 1 plat scenario to 8, officially putting me out of gold complete and into platinum for the voltaic benchmarks. It made me feel amazing and so inspired to keep trying to push toward the goal of Jade by the end of the 30 days. Now the next few days weren't anything special. Day 5 and 6 were just normal days. I had done my normal routines for the day, but other than that, there was no improvement to really show other than some slightly better scores on the scenarios in the playlists, which admittedly don't really matter to me. On day 7, however, although it was similar being another day with just the routines I had for the day, I also decided to hop on Valorant to get a feel for how my aim was feeling. The information the day gave me was about what I expected. It was also the first time I had to play the game in a few days, so I was a bit rusty. But I had some good flicks here and there, and overall my aim didn't feel too bad, but it wasn't near where I wanted to be in terms of consistency, so I still had some work to do. Now finally, the end of the first week was here, bringing day 8 and the third time I got to benchmark myself to see where I stood. This day was by far the best day I had at the time I'm writing this, being that same day. So of course better things can come when I write the scripts at the end of the weeks 2, 3, and 4, but for now, this is the best we have. I topped every single score that I had on the benchmarks, and on top of that, I got 4 more plat scores for the benchmarks, bringing me to a total of 12 out of 16 plat scores. The end of the first week brought me closer than ever to my goal that I set for myself, and was a great day overall. I decided this day as well to change some of the playlists that I had to the next level if Voltaic had them, moving the training playlist from gold up to plat, which hopefully helps me excel and finally reach plat within this next week and hopefully even plat complete. However, for now that's everything that I have for the end of week 1. I'll see you guys next week for week 2 with the next update. After a lot of ups and downs, it was finally time to deliver the recap of the second week and the halfway mark for this month of aim training. I started off on day 9 with an upgrade to the playlists that I was working on last week. To start, I went up to the Platinum Fundamentals playlist, and yet again I was humbled. As I expected, it was much harder than the gold playlist from before, but I did also expect myself to do a little bit better than I did. However, all it showed was how much I had to work on in order to continue growing over these 30 days. Day 10, just like day 9, was the next day to move up to a more difficult playlist. This time, I started the more advanced routine for Valorant. This playlist I didn't feel I struggled with as much as the fundamentals from the day before, but of course I could tell it was a step up from what I was doing beforehand. After I finished the normal playlist for the day, I moved on to some weakness areas in movement scenarios because I was painstakingly bad at them and I really wanted to be able to hold my own in them the same as I can in most of the other categories of the benchmarks. Also, the next day was finally another day of benchmarking to see if I've made any improvements over the past few days. To start the day off, I did my normal routine for benchmarking. I warmed up a bit on Kovacs, just doing whatever scenarios I thought would help me feel more confident going into the benchmarks, so I wasn't going in right after getting on. As much as I'd love to say I had the best day of benchmarking, unfortunately it was a bit lackluster as well. I did improve some of my scores from the previous week of benchmarking, but nothing was quite enough to go to a higher rank for the specific scenario or a new rank overall, so I just had to end it there and move on. The next few days, even though they weren't benchmarking, did actually have new things in them. On day 12, I started the Platinum Strafe Fundamentals. I didn't realize they were even there when I first started the Platinum Fundamentals the other day, but I'm happy I noticed them because the strafe scenarios are definitely one of my weakest areas in these benchmarks. On day 13, after I finished my normal aim training playlist for the day, I went back to the Bardo's routine. This time it felt a lot more comfortable and I was able to control my mouse at a higher sensitivity easier, which gave me a huge confidence boost, feeling like my mouse control was improving. I also did a bit of weakness playlists to try and build better habits on things like tracking and vertical scenarios, since I know they're some of my weakest areas as well. Day 14 was the last day that I had before it was time for the next day of benchmarking. This was just another day of fundamentals, and with the straight fundamentals still added into things, I was feeling a mix of emotions. On one hand, I was hitting some scores that were significantly higher than before, but on the other hand, the last day of benchmarking that I had was making me a bit nervous that I might have hit a wall that would be hard to overcome. However, worrying wouldn't help at all, so I just decided to finish my aim training and move on to the next day. Finally, the end of week 2 was here, and it was time for the next benchmarking day to see if I really had hit a wall or if it was just a bad session that day. I started the benchmarks off pretty strong and was getting pretty good scores for all of the scenarios, and I even got very close to some diamond scores. Around the second half, however, I did feel like I fell off a bit, and I wasn't doing nearly as good as I was from the first half of the playlist. This time though, it wasn't nearly as discouraging as last time. I could tell that I was getting better and better, and this session showed me that I still have a lot to work on to hit Jade in these 30 days. That's all I have for week 2. I'll see you guys next week for the next update. Finally, it's time for week 3 and the beginning of the second half of these 30 days. To start off with day 16 and 17, nothing too special happened, but the one thing I can say is that these 2 days my aim felt more smooth and consistent, and the weakness routines I was doing when I had extra time were finally starting to show in progress. On day 18, however, this was an amazing day and was a massive improvement. It was another benchmarking day, the first of the week, and I went into this with more confidence than usual because of how consistent my aim felt from the previous few days. I started off normally, going through some scenarios and bits of routines that I thought would help me to warm up for the different scenarios the benchmarks offer. There were some scenarios I was still struggling with that I needed to get into plat. Mouse TS, I hate you. Oh no, who said that? Anyway, this day helped me inch closer to diamond rank on the benchmarks, and being gold when I started these 30 days to where I was now was a huge confidence boost. This day I managed to hit 3 diamond scores, and one of them, with how I was performing, I felt like I could bring it up to Jade in the next benchmarking session. This helped me realize that everything I was doing already was paying off, so I set a mini goal for myself to try and bring all of my scores up to the same area and hit plat complete. There are some scenarios I'm still pretty bad at, but with the weakness routines I do think that I can do it. Day 19 wasn't anything special, but I started trying to focus more and more on accuracy and smoothness to be able to form better habits to make sure that I don't mess myself up in the future with bad technique. Day 20 was the same, focusing more on accuracy and smoothness as well, but this time there was some scores I was improving very heavily. I spent some extra time on weaknesses today, like tracking. In one scenario with bouncing, I went from a score to 2200 to 2600, so I can tell my tracking is becoming smoother, and hopefully it will help me hit plat on bounce TS, the bane of my existence. On another tracking and reactivity scenario, pass through track, I also improved my score significantly from 2000 to 2400, so hopefully this will help me on my benchmarks as well. Day 21 was another normal day, but I was still improving some of my scores since focusing more on smoothness and accuracy, and tomorrow being another day of benchmarking made me excited to see if the switch to focusing more on smoothness had helped at all, and spoiler alert, it did. Day 22 was of course a day of benchmarking, and I did my normal start of warming up, yada yada yada, but this day was a fantastic day of benchmarking. I felt like everything was so smooth, and to end the day I managed to get 4 diamond scores and even 1 jade score. The biggest step that I had in the goal I had set for myself 3 weeks ago. I only have 10 days left to be able to hit jade, but this day was an incredible leap since I ended the day diamond. I'm still struggling with that godforsaken bounce TS scenario, but we don't talk about that. Day 23 wasn't too special. I was still doing a bit better on some scenarios due to focusing on smoothness the past few days, but that's really all. Day 24 was the same, but at this point I was a lot more used to the straight fundamentals, and I was improving my scores by pretty good margins in the scenarios. On top of that, all the scores that I wasn't improving, I was staying in just about the same area, so I can tell that my skill floor has risen pretty significantly, and that my lows are a lot higher now. With time feeling like it was flying by, day 25 was here, and another day of benchmarking, and honestly this day was not that great. Even though it was a benchmarking day, there really wasn't anything special. I was hitting below a lot of my peaks, but I couldn't hit any new high scores. I wasn't falling so below that it was discouraging or anything, but again, no new peaks were being hit, and with 1 week left, if this continued, I wouldn't be able to hit jade. Finally, the last week was here. If things continued like they did at the end of week 3, there was no doubt that I wouldn't be able to hit jade, so I had to really do my best this week to see that goal through. Day 26, after I finished aim training for the day, I realized that I forgot to move up to the more advanced playlists, which I should have done on day 22, and this might be the reason for my failure to hit my goal if I don't manage it in this week. Day 27 would have normally been a short day since it was the day for the Valorant playlist, but I used the extra time to grind a lot of the weakness playlists to hopefully raise my skill ceiling in the areas I'm still struggling with. Day 28 was finally the day I started the Diamond Fundamentals playlist, which I should have done 6 days earlier, and this admittedly made me very nervous, because knowing I could have started these so much earlier made me feel like with just 4 days remaining, there was no way I'd be able to grow enough to hit Jade. Regardless, like I assumed, I struggled a lot with this playlist, even more so than the original jump from gold to platinum, and things were not looking good. Day 29 was a huge hit in my confidence. It was the second to last benchmarking day, and it was probably the worst day of aim training I had. I couldn't even get close to matching my highest scores on a lot of the scenarios, and with just one more benchmarking day left, this would be a horrible time to plateau and not be able to move forward. However, things changed for the better on day 30. It was the second day that I had for the Diamond Fundamentals, and it wasn't anything too special overall, but I did improve basically every score that I previously had from the first time that I had done the routine. This of course is great, considering I only have 2 more days until the end. Day 31, the last day of training before the final benchmarking session, like day 30, wasn't anything special by any means. I just did my normal routine and then spent a lot of extra time on weakness routines to hopefully improve enough in a lot of the scenarios I'm weak in so I can complete the goal I had set for myself 1 month ago. Finally, it was the beginning of the end, and day 32. The last day of benchmarking had arrived. Now, as much as I would love to say that I crushed it today and did better than ever and hit Jade, I did not. I didn't do bad by any means, but I couldn't quite reach high enough to hit that goal. I ended the day with 621 out of 700 energy, so not quite Jade. But regardless, I was proud of how much I had improved over the month. I was gold when I had started these 32 days ago, and I ended up diamond with 8 diamond scores and even 1 Jade score. And on top of all that, even after all this, I didn't ever manage to get bounced against a plat. So if I'm lucky, I might be able to barely scrape by and hit plat on it by the day I croak, but I'll probably have to dedicate the rest of my life to it. To look back on things and wrap this video up, I would say that aim training is 100% worth it. Even on day 29, which I classified as my worst day yet, looking back on it, it really was not even close to it. Reviewing the recordings from day 29 and day 4 when I first started these playlists, every single score from day 29 was still higher than they were on day 4. My skill floor on day 29 was now above what my skill ceiling was on day 4. My lows are higher than ever, and my highs are so much better than they were originally. On the screen now is 2 pictures. The one on the left is from the start of the intermediate benchmarks when I had just hit gold and I was venturing into platinum. And on the right is how I've ended, and how far I've come with the diamond scores and the jade all showcased. Anyway, moving on from that, I feel like a common question is going to be, how did this translate to games, if it did at all? And to answer that question, yes it did. I don't have enough footage currently to showcase everything since I've been putting most of my time into editing this video instead of playing, but in the background is a mini compilation of how my aim looks now. I do plan on making a video in the near future comparing my aim now to how it was in the past before aim training, but that might take a little while to put everything together like this one did, so please bear with me. Anyway, that's all I have for now. Thank you so much for watching this video, and please leave a like and maybe even subscribe if you're feeling a little extra generous today. But also let me know in the comments if you like videos like this from me that are longer, or if you prefer the videos I made previously that were around 5 to 6 minutes long. Regardless, if you've made it this far, thank you again for staying. Have a great day. Goodbye.